The desert wind howled like a dying man, and Sarah McKenna thought it was calling her name. She'd been running for 3 days. Or was it 4? The sun didn't care. It just hung in the sky, a hateful orange eye, boiling the world down to rock and dust. Her dress, once a pretty calico blue, was now just rags and filth. Her feet were a bloody mess, wrapped in strips of her petticoat because her boots had given up somewhere back at Bitter Creek. Every step was a new kind of hell. But stopping? Stopping was worse. Behind her was the smoke of her old life, a little ranch house outside Copper Ridge, where she was supposed to be a respectable widow. That's what they all thought. They didn't know how her husband really died. They didn't know about the man who came after, the man who claimed her like she was a stray cow. Judge Harrison Blackwood. A hot flash of memory made her stumble, her hand flying to her hip. Beneath the layers of torn cloth, the skin was raised and ugly. A brand. His brand. He'd pressed the hot iron into her himself, his breath thick with whiskey and righteousness. "You belong to me now, Sarah," he'd said. "The law says so." The good people of Copper Ridge? They'd looked the other way, whispered that she must have tempted such a fine man. A Jezebel, they called her. So she ran. She ran east, into the one place everyone said was certain death. Apache territory. Her water was long gone. Her tongue was a dry stone in her mouth. They said a person could last 3 days without water. She prayed this was only day 2. A lizard shot past her, vanishing into a crack in the rocks. It knew the secrets of this place. She just knew the green fields of Ohio, a lifetime away. She had to keep moving. The sun climbed higher, and she found a sliver of shade behind a rock that looked like a giant's tombstone. She collapsed, and for a second, she was back in that house, with Blackwood's hands on her. "Body and soul, Sarah," he'd whispered, the brand still glowing in his hand. She jerked awake, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs. The shade was gone. How long had she been out? The desert played tricks. It made you see water where there was none, made you hear hoof beats in the wind. She had to find water, or this God-forsaken land would be her grave. But at least here, she'd die free. No man would own her last breath. As evening painted the rocks purple and gold, she saw it, a dark slash in the earth ahead. A canyon. Canyons could mean water. The thought gave her a last burst of strength. She scrambled down the steep wall, loose rock clattering below her. Darkness fell fast, and the brutal heat gave way to a biting cold. She reached the bottom and saw it, a pool of water, no bigger than a wash basin, captured in a hollow of rock. More precious than all the gold in the world. She fell to her knees, forcing herself to sip slowly. Too much, too fast, and she'd lose it all. The water tasted like dirt and minerals, and it was the sweetest thing she'd ever known. But the canyon that gave her life was also a trap. The walls were too steep to climb in the dark. She was exposed. Huddled in a crevice, she pulled her rags tight as the coyotes began to sing their lonely song. She had never felt so small, so utterly alone. And yet, there was a wildness here, a freedom she'd never tasted inside the fences of civilization. Then she heard it. Not the wind, not an animal. It was deliberate. A footstep, a horse picking its way down the canyon wall. She pressed herself into the shadows, her breath caught in her throat. Her fingers closed around a sharp rock. A pathetic weapon, but it was all she had. The sound came again, closer. Starlight revealed a silhouette on the opposite wall. The figure moved with a silence and ease that wasn't a white man's. It was the fluid grace of someone who was born of this land. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She'd stumbled right into the lion's den, an Apache. The stories from town flooded her mind. Scalpings, torture, warriors who showed no mercy. She was too tired to run, too broken to fight. She closed her eyes. "Just finish me," she whispered into the darkness. At least it would be over. The footsteps stopped. He stood like a statue carved from the night, watching her. His name was Nietzsche. He'd been tracking the white woman for hours, her clumsy trail an open book to him. He'd seen her desperation, smelled her fear, a fear greater than just the desert. He had watched from the ridge as she drank from the spring his grandfather had shown him, the same spring where his wife, Little Dove, had filled her gourds before the blue-coated soldiers came. The memory was a hot knife in his gut. The smoke, the screams, the tiny, still bodies of his children. Civilization, they'd called it. Since that day, he was a ghost, his heart a dry riverbed. He moved closer, silent as a shadow. He could smell her terror. Good. Let her feel what his people felt. Then he heard her whisper, "Just finish me." The words were not a plea for life, but a surrender to death. It wasn't right. He stepped into the clearing. Her eyes flew open, wide with terror in the moonlight. She scrambled back, clutching that useless rock. He saw the bruises on her arms, the hollow emptiness in her eyes. This woman wasn't just running from the desert. She was running from a demon. His hand went to the knife at his belt. An eye for an eye. A white life for the Apache, lives taken. It would be justice. But something held him back. The look in her eyes. It was the look of his own people. The look of the hunted. He saw not an enemy, but a reflection of his own pain. He took another step, and she flinched. "No hurt," he said. The English words felt like ash on his tongue. He'd sworn never to speak their language again. Her eyes widened in disbelief. You speak English?" He nodded, crouching to make himself less of a threat. "Why here?" he asked, his voice rough. "Apache land. White woman, no come here." "I had nowhere else to go," she whispered. "He was chasing me." "Who chase?" Her hand moved to her hip, a gesture he didn't miss. "A man," she said, her voice trembling. "A powerful man. He thinks he owns me." Ownership. The word struck Nietzsche like a blow. His people knew that word, knew what it was to be treated like cattle, rounded up and moved from place to place. He stood up. "Stand." She struggled to her feet, swaying with exhaustion. He made a decision that went against 2 years of hate. "You come," he said, turning to the canyon wall. "No safe here. Soldiers come, maybe at sunrise." "Soldiers!" Her voice cracked. "Are they looking for me?" "Always looking," he grunted. "For Apache. For excuse to kill. You choose. Them or me." It wasn't a choice. She knew what the soldiers would do. They'd take her right back to Judge Blackwood, back to that house of horrors. Following a savage into the unknown was better than the certainty of that hell. "I'll come," she said. He nodded and began to climb, moving like a lizard up the sheer rock face. She followed, clumsy and bleeding, her city-soft body screaming in protest. He never offered a hand, but he waited, a silent, dark shape against the growing light in the east. They reached the top as the first blush of dawn touched the horizon. He led her through a maze of stone and thorns, a world that was a trackless wasteland to her, but a map to him. As the sun began to heat the air, he stopped at a cluster of boulders and pulled aside some brush, revealing the mouth of a small cave. "In," he commanded. She hesitated. Every instinct screamed not to follow a strange man into a dark hole, but one look back at the vast, empty desert told her she had no other options. She crawled inside. The cave was cool and sandy. He followed, covering the entrance. He handed her a gourd of water. It was cool and sweet. "Rest," he said. "Today, too hot for travel." She curled up against the wall, but she couldn't sleep. Not with him sitting there near the entrance, watching her with those dark, unreadable eyes. "Why?" she finally asked. "Why didn't you kill me?" He was silent for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was filled with a sorrow so deep it crossed any language. "Already too much killing," he said. "My woman, my children. Soldiers kill them." He looked at her, and for the first time, she saw something other than hardness in his eyes. "I think maybe kill all whites. Make even. But you—" he searched for the words. "You already dead inside. I see in eyes. Someone kill you slow, like they kill my people slow." The truth of it hit her like a punch to the gut. She was dead inside, a walking ghost. Tears she hadn't let herself cry for months finally broke free, silent and hot on her dusty cheeks. "Sleep now," he said, his voice surprisingly gentle. "Tomorrow we see what spirits decide." As she drifted into an exhausted sleep, Nietzsche kept his watch. The white woman complicated everything. He couldn't keep her. He couldn't let her go. He stared out at the desert, now shimmering with heat, and wondered what the spirits were playing at. Her fate and his were now tangled together, two broken souls lost in the wilderness. And he had a terrible feeling that the real monsters hadn't even shown up yet. Sarah woke to the smell of roasting meat. The late afternoon sun filtered through the brush covering the cave entrance. She had slept the entire day away. Nietzsche sat by a small, smokeless fire, turning a rabbit on a spit. He had also brought a piece of cactus, its flesh glistening with moisture. "Eat," he said. It wasn't a suggestion. They ate in silence. The meat was tough, but it was the first real food she'd had in days. As she ate, she found herself studying him, the way his hands moved, efficient and sure, the scars on his arms, the constant watchfulness in his eyes. She had learned that kindness from men always came with a price. She was just waiting to find out what it was. As darkness fell, he pulled out strips of rawhide. Her heart plummeted. So this was it. He was going to tie her up. "Is necessary," he said, reading the fear on her face before she could speak. "You run in night, die in desert, or bring soldiers." His logic was sound, but the feel of the rawhide on her wrists brought back the choking memory of ropes, of helplessness, of Judge Blackwood's sneering face. She bit her lip until she tasted blood, using the small pain to anchor herself in the here and now. He led her from the cave to a hidden box canyon where a small wickiup, a dome-shaped Apache shelter, stood almost invisible against the rocks. This was his home. He tied her to a post near the shelter. The bonds were firm, not cruel, but they were bonds all the same. She was a prisoner again, traded one cage for another. "Why keep me?" she asked, her voice flat. "Why not just let me die?" He poked at the small fire. "You bring trouble," he said. "Soldiers look for white woman. Find me. They no care about truth. Just kill." He looked up, his eyes catching the firelight. "But also, spirits maybe send you for reason. Must think." The night dragged on. He sat across the fire, fletching arrows, his hands moving with a life of their own while his mind seemed far away. The silence stretched until it was a physical thing between them. "Tell me," he said suddenly, his voice startling her, "the man who chased you, why he think he own you?" The question she had been dreading. Her hand fluttered toward her hip. "He's a judge," she began, the words tasting like poison. "My husband died. He said I needed protection." The word came out as a bitter laugh. "Protection," Nietzsche repeated, the skepticism clear in his voice. "He said the law gave him the right, that a woman alone was unnatural. When I refused him, her voice broke. "He took what he wanted, and then he marked me, so everyone would know." Nietzsche's hands stilled. "Marked." Sarah nodded, unable to speak past the lump of shame in her throat. She had never spoken these words aloud. "Show me," he said. It wasn't a request. It was a command. Trembling, she pulled at the rags of her dress, exposing the scarred skin of her hip. Nietzsche moved closer, holding a burning stick for light. She squeezed her eyes shut, bracing for the disgust, the judgment. She heard his sharp intake of breath. The brand was crude but unmistakable. The letters, HB, Harrison Blackwood, burned into her flesh as if she were livestock. "This man," Nietzsche said, his voice a low growl, "is no man. He is animal." She opened her eyes, shocked. He wasn't looking at her with revulsion. He was looking at the brand with a pure, cold rage, a rage that was not for her, but for the one who did this. "My people," he continued, his voice shaking with fury, "we have marks. Warrior marks. We choose them. This," he gestured at the ugly scar, "this is mark of coward, who must burn his name on woman because he knows she never choose him." Tears streamed down her face. For the first time, someone saw, someone understood. The good Christian women in town had blamed her. This man, this savage, saw the truth. "Apache know about marks white men leave," he said, moving back to his side of the fire. "They mark our land with fences, our bodies with bullets, always taking, always marking what is not theirs." The invisible line connecting their two worlds suddenly became visible. They were both scarred, both survivors of a relentless, possessive cruelty. "Your family," she whispered. You said soldiers. His face hardened into a stone mask. 2 winters ago. Camp Grant. Soldiers come at dawn. Said we must move. We were packing. No fight, but they start shooting. His voice was flat, devoid of all emotion. My wife, little dove, running with baby. Bullet find them both. My son, 5 summers. He tried to protect his sister. They shoot him too. He spoke the words as if reciting a list. She knew that tone. It was the only way to speak of things too terrible for tears. I'm sorry, she whispered. Sorry, no, bring them back, he said. I live because too angry to die. Not living, just waiting. Waiting for what? He shrugged. For good day to die. For sign from spirits. Then you come. Marked woman, running. Maybe. You are sign. She didn't know what to say. The fire crackled, casting long, dancing shadows. He stood and walked the perimeter of the camp, a silent predator in his own domain. When he returned, he did something that stunned her. He untied her hands. No run, he said. It was a statement, not a question. Desert kill you, or worse, men find you. You stay here, for now. She rubbed her raw wrists. What happens tomorrow? Tomorrow we move, deeper in mountains. I know place. He looked at her ruined feet. You need shoes, I fix. The simple, practical statement was more shocking than any threat. Why are you helping me? He stared into the fire for a long time. Maybe helping you is helping me, he said at last. Maybe keeping one white woman's safe balance against ones I couldn't save. Or maybe I just tired of all the dying. He tossed her a blanket. Sleep. Tomorrow is hard travel. She wrapped herself in the rough wool, the smell of smoke and sage filling her senses. For the first time in months, she didn't feel like prey. This savage, this killer, had shown her more decency than anyone in her own civilized world. As she drifted to sleep, she watched him by the dying fire, a lonely, haunted figure. 2 broken people hiding from a world that had no place for them. And as she slept, she dreamt not of Judge Blackwood, but of a man with eyes full of sorrow, and a tiny, impossible spark of hope began to glow in the darkness of her soul. The next morning, as Nietzsche fashioned a pair of makeshift moccasins for her feet, she knew she had to tell him the rest. The brand was the what, not the why. There's more, she said quietly, about my husband. His hands didn't stop their work, but she felt his attention sharpen. His name was Thomas. He died 2 years ago. Snakebite. He was a good man. She took a breath. After he was gone, Judge Blackwood started coming around. At first he seemed kind, said he was protecting me. I was a fool. I thought he was a friend. Her laugh was a brittle, ugly thing. One night he came to the ranch, drunk. Said it was time I showed my gratitude. When I refused him, she trailed off, the memory still raw. He was stronger. Afterward, he just laughed, said no one would ever believe me over him. A pillar of the community. Nietzsche's jaw was a hard line. He looked up from his work, his eyes black pools of anger. It got worse, she pushed on, needing to get it all out. He came back with papers, said he owned the loan on my ranch and I was behind on payments. It was a lie. He gave me a choice, be his mistress or lose everything. I told him I'd rather live in the dirt. That's when he held me down. That's when he heated the iron. The finished moccasins fell from Nietzsche's hands. He kept me locked in his house in town for 3 months, she whispered. A prisoner. The whole town knew. They whispered about the judge's fallen woman. Some of them said I should be grateful. How you escape? Nietzsche's voice was rough. He got careless, drunk. One night he forgot to lock the door. I ran. I stole a horse and I ran straight for the desert. I figured he'd think I was dead, that his pride would be satisfied. Nietzsche picked up the moccasins and knelt at her feet. His touch was surprisingly gentle as he fitted them onto her. This judge, he said slowly, is like men who take our land. They use papers. They use laws. But law is just word for stealing. He tied the leather thongs. My people have word, he said, looking up at her. And it means the people. But it also means human being. This judge, these townspeople. They are not Nende. They look human, but inside, empty. He stood and offered her his hand. She took it. As they broke camp, carefully erasing every sign of their presence, she watched him. He moved with a purpose that came from a deep connection to the world around him. He was a man shaped by loss, but not broken by it. Not yet. They climbed out of the canyon into a world of breathtaking, brutal beauty. He led her along paths she never would have seen, stepping on solid rock to leave no tracks, showing her which plants held water, which insects were safe to eat. This land that had been her enemy was his home. During a rest in the blistering midday heat, she asked, "Are there others, like you, living free?" He nodded. "Some, not many. Each season, fewer. Young ones go to reservation, learn white ways, forget Apache ways. Soon, maybe only ghosts left in these mountains." The sadness in his voice was a raw, open wound. They walked on, the silence between them filled with the ghosts of all they had lost. Later, she had to ask the question that burned in her mind. "Why did you really spare me? The truth." He stopped and looked at her, his gaze so intense it felt like he was seeing straight into her soul. "Night you come to spring," he said, his voice low. "I was tracking you, to kill you, another white person on sacred land." He took a sip from his gourd. "But when I saw you, you reminded me of a Apache woman I once found, escaped from Mexican slavers. Same look in eyes, dead inside, body still moving, but spirit gone." He looked away toward the distant mountains. "I helped that woman find her people. Thought maybe it balanced the hate in my heart. Then soldiers killed my family anyway." He turned back to her. "When I saw you," spirits whispered, "maybe they give me second chance. Maybe this time I do better job." The weight of his confession settled on her. She wasn't just some random woman he'd found. She was his penance, his chance at redemption. "I don't need protection," she said softly. "I just need to learn how to live in a world that doesn't want me." "World has no place for Apache either," he replied. "Maybe that's why spirits bring us together. Two people with no place, making new place in empty spaces between." By late afternoon, they reached a narrow crack in a sheer rock face. She thought it was a dead end, but he led her through it, and the world opened up. They were in a hidden valley, a small paradise of green grass and clear water, surrounded by towering cliffs. Ancient ruins crumbled near a spring-fed pool. "Apache sanctuary," he explained. "Spirit is strong here." She felt it, a profound sense of peace. For the first time since she'd started running, the frantic knot in her stomach began to unwind. As they set up camp, she worked beside him, a strange feeling of homecoming washing over her. That night by the fire, under a blanket of stars so thick it looked like spilled diamonds, she felt a shift inside her. The fear was still there, but it wasn't in charge anymore. "Tomorrow," Nietzsche said, staring into the flames, "I teach you to survive. Not just hide, but live. Dessert can be friend if you know how to ask." She nodded. He was offering her more than just skills. He was offering her a way back to herself. In this ancient hidden place, for the first time, she began to believe it was possible. The branded woman could die, and someone new, someone stronger, could be born from the ashes. The days in the valley settled into a rhythm. He taught her everything. How to read the trail of a deer, how to find the root that eases pain, how to craft a snare that could catch a rabbit. He showed her the plant that could be used to poison an arrow. "Or a man who forces himself on a woman," he'd said, his eyes hard. "Apache women are not helpless." Her soft hands grew calloused, her skin turned brown, and a strength she never knew she possessed began to bloom in her muscles and in her soul. She learned to move with the silence of the desert, her eyes constantly scanning, reading the language of the land. Their careful distance began to shrink. It happened in small moments. One evening she saw him wince as he fletched an arrow, favoring his shoulder. "You're hurt," she said. "Is it nothing? Let me see." It wasn't a request. She had learned a stubbornness from him that she now used against him. He reluctantly pulled off his shirt. An old bullet wound, poorly healed, was red and inflamed. "Soldiers," he said gruffly. "Last winter." She cleaned the wound with herbs he had taught her to identify, her fingers gentle on his skin. It was the first time she had touched a man by choice since her husband died. She was intensely aware of the heat of his body, the firelight playing over the landscape of scars on his back. "This Apache warrior will rest," she said, tying a bandage she'd made from the last of her petticoat. "Or his white woman student will hide all his arrows." A smile touched the corner of his mouth, the first she had ever seen. It changed his entire face, giving her a glimpse of the man he was, before grief had carved its lines into him. The next morning she woke to find a simple necklace of turquoise beads beside her sleeping roll. "For protection," he mumbled, not looking at her, "and for thank you." She fastened it around her neck, the cool stones a comfort against her skin. The unspoken things between them were growing louder every day. She found herself watching the grace in his movements, the strength in his hands. He, in turn, would watch her when he thought she wasn't looking, a strange, unreadable expression in his eyes. One afternoon, a sudden thunderstorm trapped them under a narrow rock overhang. The sky ripped open, and rain fell in silver sheets. Pressed close together, soaked and shivering, the space between them vanished. Without a word, he wrapped his arms around her, sharing his warmth. She leaned into him, feeling a sense of safety she had thought was lost to her forever. When the storm passed, they pulled apart slowly, a new, fragile understanding hanging in the charged air. That night she made a decision. She stood by the fire and unbraided her hair, letting it fall loose around her shoulders. It was an Apache custom, he had told her. A woman's hair, worn loose, was an invitation, an act of trust. He watched her, his face a mask in the firelight. Then he rose, went to his pack, and returned with a carved wooden comb. He moved behind her, and with infinite gentleness, began to comb the tangles from her hair. Each stroke was a question, each soft pull a confession. "My people believe hair holds power," he whispered, his voice close to her ear. "A man who touches a woman's hair is trusted with her spirit." She turned to face him, tears shimmering in her eyes. "I trust you," she said. He looked at her, a silent battle raging in his eyes. His own grief, his loyalty to his dead wife, his growing feelings for her. He handed her the comb. "Is late," he said, his voice rough. "We checked traps early." He had retreated, but she understood. They were both so wounded, so afraid of causing more pain. As she lay in her blankets, she could hear his restless breathing on the other side of the fire. The walls they had built around their hearts were crumbling, and they were both terrified of what would happen when they finally fell. The peace was shattered by the distant sound of horses. Sarah was by the spring when she heard it. Not the wild ponies of the mountain. This was the steady, disciplined sound of cavalry. She ran back to camp. Nietzsche was already on his feet, his body coiled like a snake ready to strike. "Soldiers," he said grimly. "Coming this way." "How?" "Maybe they tracked me for months. Maybe they saw smoke. No matter now. We go." They grabbed what they could, water, weapons, a little food, and fled, climbing a treacherous rock face at the back of the valley. From the top, they could see the blue-coated soldiers entering their sanctuary far below. "They have Apache scout," Nietzsche hissed, pointing to a figure on a pinto pony. "See his red headband, a traitor to his own people." They ran. All day they pushed through brutal country, Nietzsche choosing paths a horse couldn't follow, but the soldiers were relentless. By late afternoon, they heard a shout from below. They'd been seen. A shot rang out, whining off the rock near Sarah's head. "Run!" Nietzsche yelled, pushing her ahead of him. They scrambled up a steep ridge, her lungs on fire, her legs screaming. At the top, they found themselves trapped. A sheer cliff dropped hundreds of feet to a raging river below. There was no way down, no way around. Behind them, the soldiers were closing in. "Jump," Nietzsche said. She stared at him, then at the churning water. "We'll die." "Maybe," he said, grabbing her hand, his grip like iron. "Stay here, we die for sure. Trust me." Another bullet sparked off the rock between them. She looked into his eyes and saw no fear, only a fierce, unwavering resolve. She nodded. Together, they ran to the edge and leaped into the empty air. The fall felt like an eternity. The impact was a brutal, cold shock that drove the air from her lungs. The current grabbed her, pulling her under, tumbling her over and over. Her heavy skirt was a lead weight dragging her down. Just as her vision started to go black, a strong hand gripped her arm and hauled her to the surface. Nietzsche. He kept her head above water as the river smashed them against rocks and tried to pull them apart. They washed up on the far bank, half drowned, bruised and bleeding. Across the river, the soldiers stood on the cliff top, shouting and pointing. They find a crossing, Nietzsche gasped, pulling her to her feet. We gained time, not freedom. They stumbled away from the river. Sarah, without a second thought, tore the bottom half of her heavy skirt away, freeing her legs. They were leaving a trail a child could follow. Then they heard a new sound carrying on the wind. Barking. Dog, Nietzsche said, his voice grim. They really want us. The forest gave way to open, rocky ground. In the distance, they saw a cloud of dust. The soldiers had crossed the river and were coming fast. Nietzsche pointed to a jumble of boulders ahead. We make stand there. It was a poor defense, a place to die. As they took cover, the first riders appeared on the horizon, spreading out to surround them. I'm sorry, Sarah gasped, checking the rifle Nietzsche had taught her to use. I brought this on you. No, he said, his eyes fixed on the approaching soldiers. Spirit's meant for us to stand together. I choose this. I choose you. Then a voice called out, not a soldier's bark, but a cold, cultured tone that turned her blood to ice. Sarah McKenna, I know you're in there, my dear. Judge Harrison Blackwood rode forward, immaculate in his black suit, an obscene blot on the wild landscape. That's him, she whispered. I know, Nietzsche growled. I see his evil. Come out, Sarah, Blackwood called, his voice oozing false concern. You've clearly had some sort of hysterical fit. I'm prepared to forgive you. Come home, where you belong. I'd rather die, she screamed back, the words tearing from her throat. His voice turned hard as steel. That can be arranged. The savage who kidnapped you will hang. Unless, of course, you come out now and say you went willingly. In that case, he'll simply be shot while trying to escape. The trap snapped shut. Her life for his honor, her surrender for his quick death. Sarah, Nietzsche said quietly, you go. Tell them I forced you. Live. No. Her voice was iron. We stand together, or we fall together. She reached for his hand, their fingers lacing together. Let them see. So be it, Blackwood called. Captain, fire at will. Take the woman alive if you can. The soldiers raised their rifles. Sarah pressed against Nietzsche, ready to die. She wasn't afraid. Death beside this man was a better fate than life with that one. I love you, she whispered, the truth of it hitting her with the force of a physical blow. Nietzsche turned to her, his eyes wide. Sarah, A single shot cracked the air, but it didn't come from the soldiers. One of the troopers flew backward off his horse, then another, and another. Chaos erupted. From the rocks all around them, figures rose as if from the earth itself. Apache warriors, their faces painted for war, their rifles spitting fire with deadly accuracy. The soldiers, caught in a perfect ambush, scattered in panic. Through the smoke and confusion, Sarah saw Blackwood trying to flee, but a warrior leaped from a boulder, dragging the judge from his saddle. The battle was over in minutes. The surviving soldiers were in full retreat. The canyon was suddenly silent, except for the groans of the wounded. An older warrior with gray in his hair approached them. It was Victorio, a legendary war chief. He spoke rapidly to Nietzsche in Apache. He is my mother's cousin, Nietzsche translated for Sarah. He says the spirits told him in a dream to protect the golden-haired woman. Victorio's eyes, sharp and intelligent, studied her. He spoke again. He says you fight like an Apache woman, Nietzsche translated, a note of pride in his voice. Sarah's gaze fell on Judge Blackwood, who was being held on the ground at spear point, his fine suit torn and filthy, his face a mask of terror. Victorio followed her gaze. He asks if this is the man who marked you, Nietzsche said. Apache law gives you the right to justice. Sarah walked toward Blackwood. He was no longer a monster, just a pathetic, trembling man. Please, he whimpered, I have money. Quiet, she said. She turned to Victorio and Nietzsche. I don't want him dead. Death is too easy. I want him to live with the shame, the way he made me live. She looked at the chief. Is there an Apache mark for a coward? For a man who hurts women? A grim smile touched Victorio's lips. He barked an order. What they did to him was not torture. It was something far worse. They didn't scar his body with heat, but with symbols. They cut his fine black coat into the shape of a woman's dress. They painted his face not with the marks of a warrior, but with the symbols of a liar and a coward. Marks that any Apache and anyone who knew their ways would recognize forever. Then they let him go, sending him stumbling back toward his world, stripped not of his life, but of his power, his pride, and his honor. As the war band prepared to leave, Victorio spoke to Nietzsche one last time. He offers us a place with his people, Nietzsche said to Sarah, his expression unreadable. He says times are changing, that maybe a white woman who fights like an Apache can help bridge the two worlds. Or, he paused, we can go our own way. We have his protection. He looked at her, and the question was not about where they would go, but who they would be. What do you want? She asked softly. He reached out and touched the turquoise necklace at her throat. I want to wake each morning knowing you are safe, he said. I want to find out who we can be, together, in this world. Tears of joy, not sorrow, streamed down her cheeks. Then we go where you go, she said. Your people will be my people. As the war band rode into the sunset, Sarah looked back at the battlefield. Her old life was gone, burned away in the desert sun and washed away in the river. A new one was beginning, riding beside the man who saw her as a warrior, surrounded by the people who had claimed her as their own. Sarah McKenna, the branded woman, was finally, truly free. The band rode through the night, the wounded carried on travois. Victorio called a halt in a sheltered canyon. While the warriors set up a defense, Sarah found herself working alongside the band's medicine man, her hands, once soft, now skilled at cleaning and dressing wounds. The other warriors watched her, their suspicion slowly melting into a grudging respect. Later, Victorio called a council. Nietzsche pulled her into the circle to sit beside him, a public declaration of her status. They spoke of the future, of fighting, of running to Mexico, of survival. Then an old warrior pointed a finger at her. His words were harsh. He says a white woman brings danger, Nietzsche translated reluctantly, that you could be a spy. The weight of their distrust was heavy. Before she could find the words, Nietzsche stood. He spoke in passionate Apache, his voice ringing through the canyon. He told them her story. He told them of the brand, of her courage, of her choice to stand and die with him rather than surrender. She has earned the right to be heard, he finished in English. Let her speak. Sarah stood, her heart pounding. I know you have no reason to trust my people, she said, her voice shaking but clear. They have brought you nothing but death, but I am no longer one of them. They cast me out, marked me, and tried to break me. Nietzsche saved my spirit. He showed me what honor is. I choose to stand with you, not because I have to, but because it is right. A hush fell over the circle. An ancient woman, her face a roadmap of wrinkles, pushed her way to the front. The warriors parted for her with reverence. She was eyes that see far, the tribe's eldest medicine woman. She studied Sarah with eyes that seemed to strip away all pretense. Then she spoke, her voice like the rustling of dry leaves. Victorio himself translated. She says the spirit spoke to her in a dream of a golden-haired woman, marked by pain, who would come from the east carrying hope. She says you are meant to be here. The old woman reached out and touched Sarah's face. She spoke again. She says you will bear children who walk between two worlds. Victorio translated, a look of awe on his face. Warriors who will have the strength of the Apache and the knowledge of the white man. This is why the spirits brought you to Nietzsche. Eyes that see far then turned to Nietzsche and said something that made the warriors chuckle and Nietzsche blush. She says I'm a fool if I don't claim you properly before another man sees your worth, he muttered to Sarah. The council was over. Sarah's place was sealed. Later, under the light of the moon, Nietzsche led her to a quiet spot overlooking the canyon. What she said, Sarah began, about us. Medicine women see things, Nietzsche replied. But a vision is a path, not a cage. You are always free to choose. This I promise. Today, she said, turning to face him, when I thought we were going to die, I realized something. Fighting beside you was the first real choice I've ever made. Not from fear or duty, but from my heart. She reached up and touched his face. Apache life is not easy, he warned. Always danger. Some of my people will never fully accept you. I've had soft beds and fine clothes, she said. They came with invisible chains. Here, at least I know where I stand. When little Dove died, he said, his voice thick with emotion, I thought my heart died too. But you woke something in me. It is different, stronger maybe, because we both know what it costs to love. I love you, she said, the words simple and true. Not because you saved me, but because of your honor. Because with you I am not a possession, I am a person. He pulled her into his arms, and their first real kiss was both tender and fierce, a sealing of a bond forged in fire and blood. In my culture, he said softly, a man must prove he can provide. I have nothing to give you but my heart. That is all I need. A raspy voice came from the shadows. It was eyes that see far. She spoke at length, gesturing between them. She says the spirits already joined us when we chose to die together, Nietzsche translated, looking embarrassed. She says a ceremony is just for humans to see what the spirits already know. He paused. She also says if we are going to act married, we should stop sneaking around and share a blanket properly. The old woman cackled. She held up 2 strips of beaded leather. She offers to perform the joining ceremony. Tonight. She says waiting is foolish when tomorrow is never promised. He looked at Sarah. Only if you are ready. Sarah thought of a life of rules and propriety that had led her to ruin. Then she thought of this wild, uncertain life that had made her whole. I'm ready, she said. I've never been more certain of anything. And so, under a vast desert sky, surrounded by warriors who had become her family, they were joined. No church, no judge. Just 2 broken people made strong by each other, their wrists bound together with beaded leather, a symbol not of ownership, but of partnership. The ceremony was barely over when a scout rode into camp. A full company of soldiers was riding hard, not far behind. The wedding celebration was over. The flight was on again. As they prepared to ride, Eyes That See Far pressed a small medicine bundle into Sarah's hand. A great honor, Nietzsche whispered, for protection. Sarah swung onto her horse, her husband beside her. Somewhere in the darkness behind them was the army. The future was a razor's edge. But for the first time in her life, she was not running from something. She was riding toward something. The brand on her hip was a scar from a past that was no longer hers. She had chosen her own mark now. Warrior. Wife. And as the Apache band melted into the night, Sarah McKenna, who had run into the desert to die, rode into the mountains to begin her life. For 3 days they rode, a desperate game of hide-and-seek with the soldiers. But this time Sarah was not helpless prey. She was a part of the band, her eyes sharp, her body hardened to the trail. On the 3rd night, a thunderstorm washed their tracks away, and they finally found refuge in a sacred valley high in the mountains. As dawn broke, she stood with Nietzsche on a cliff overlooking the world they had left behind. Do you regret it? He asked. I regret the pain, she said, but that world never had a place for the real me. She touched the brand through her clothes, then the medicine bundle at her neck. This says I am property. This says I have worth. The choice is not difficult. Eyes That See Far joined them. The spirits have shown me a vision, she said, and Nietzsche translated. Hard times are coming for the people, but there is hope. Children who will be bridge builders between the 2 worlds. The old woman placed a hand on Sarah's stomach, her ancient eyes smiling. Life finds a way. Nietzsche looked at her, his eyes wide with a mixture of awe and terror. Is it true? He whispered. You carry our child. Sarah nodded, tears of joy filling her eyes. He pulled her into a fierce, protective embrace. This changes everything, he said. A father must think of the future. In the weeks that followed, a new plan was forged. They would try to negotiate with the whites, not from a position of weakness, but of strength. And Sarah, with her knowledge of that other world, became a key voice in their councils. One day a writer brought news. Judge Harrison Blackwood was dead. Shamed and cast out, marked as a coward, He had drunk himself into a stupor and ridden his horse off a cliff. Sarah felt nothing but the quiet closing of a door to a room she would never enter again. As autumn painted the mountains gold, Sarah's pregnancy advanced. The Apache women taught her their birthing songs, their knowledge of herbs, their strength. One crisp evening, as the sun set in a blaze of glory, she gave birth to a daughter, with her mother's fair skin and her father's dark hair. "She is perfect," Nietzsche whispered, holding his child for the first time. Eyes that see far suggested an Apache name, Anushki, Morning Star Woman, for she came at the meeting of two worlds. "And an English name too," Sarah said, exhausted and euphoric. "Hope, for that is what she is." Nursing her daughter, Sarah looked at the life she had built from the ashes of her old one. The challenges were immense. The Apache way of life was under siege. But here, in this sacred place, she had found something she never knew she was looking for. A home, a purpose, a family. The brand on her hip would always be a part of her story, a reminder of the cruelty she had survived. But it no longer defined her. She had been marked by violence, but she had chosen to be marked by love. The scars had not vanished, but they had been woven into a new and beautiful pattern. As the first stars appeared, Sarah began to sing to her daughter, a soft Apache lullaby taught to her by the old women. Her voice, once silenced by fear, rose strong and clear in the mountain air. Nietzsche sat beside them, his arm around his new family, watching the endless stars emerge. The desert had not been her grave. It had been her salvation. The savage had not been her enemy. He had been her heart. And the woman who was once property had finally found her freedom. Thank you for listening to this tale from the Old West. Where are you enjoying this story from? Please comment below and let's connect across the miles. Don't forget to subscribe to the From Wild West channel and share your thoughts about Sarah and Nietzsche's journey. Your comments help bring these historical tales to life.